Imagine waking up one morning to find out that the price of gasoline has skyrocketed overnight. For millions of Americans, this scenario is all too familiar. On May 4, 2022, gas prices hit an all-time high, with the average cost per gallon reaching a staggering $5.22. This sudden spike in fuel costs can have a ripple effect on our daily lives, making even the most mundane tasks feel like a burden. But what if I told you that oil price shocks like this one are not just isolated events? In fact, they're becoming more frequent and severe. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, has been at the center of several major oil price hikes in recent years, with Saudi Arabia and Russia often holding sway over global energy markets. When prices skyrocket like this, it's not just a matter of filling up your gas tank that's affected, it's an economic shockwave that reverberates throughout entire communities. Families who rely on long commutes to work or school are forced to shell out more money for fuel, eating into their budgets and reducing disposable income. But the impact goes beyond just personal finances. A study by the University of California, Berkeley found that a 10% increase in gas prices can lead to a corresponding 3 to 4% decline in economic activity. That's because when people have to spend more on fuel, they've got less money to spend on other things, like groceries, housing, and healthcare. As we'll explore further, the consequences of oil price shocks are far-reaching and multifaceted. From crippling consumer spending power to fueling inflation and even influencing global politics, it's clear that these events have a profound impact on our lives. So what exactly causes these price spikes? How do they affect your wallet, and our economy as a whole? Imagine waking up one morning to find out that the price of gasoline has skyrocketed overnight, and your daily commute just got a whole lot more expensive. For millions of Americans, this scenario is all too familiar. On May 4, 2022, gas prices hit an all-time high, with the average cost per gallon reaching $4.92 according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The sudden and drastic increase in oil prices has far-reaching consequences for consumers, businesses, and even governments. The rising costs of fuel are reflected in higher prices at the pump, but that's not the only impact. As oil is a global commodity, price shocks can ripple across entire economies, affecting everything from food production to transportation. The 1973 oil embargo, triggered by an Arab-Israeli conflict, was one of the earliest and most significant examples of how oil price shocks can devastate economies. The embargo led to a quadrupling of oil prices, causing widespread shortages, recession, and even civil unrest in some countries. In the United States alone, the price increase contributed to a 1974-75 recession that saw unemployment soar above 9%. More recently, on January 6, 2020, OPEC+, a coalition of major oil-producing nations, announced an unprecedented production cut to boost sagging oil prices. However, this decision was short-lived as the COVID-19 pandemic led to a collapse in demand for oil, sending prices plummeting below $20 per barrel by April 2020. Since then, global events have continued to drive oil price volatility, from tensions between the US and Iran to supply chain disruptions caused by the ongoing pandemic. As we'll explore in this video, these fluctuations have significant effects on household budgets, economic growth, and even national security policies. The oil price shock that struck on May 4, 2022, sent shockwaves through the economy. Gas prices reached an all-time high, with the average cost per gallon soaring to $4.33 in the United States, according to data from the Energy Information Administration. This sudden spike was a stark reminder of how vulnerable we are to fluctuations in global oil markets. The impact of this price shock was felt far beyond the pump. As gas prices rose, so did inflation. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that gasoline accounted for over 40% of the monthly increase in the Consumer Price Index, which jumped by 0.9% in May alone. This is significant because high inflation erodes purchasing power and reduces disposable income. But it's not just about the dollars and cents. When gas prices spike, millions of Americans face difficult choices every day. For some, it means cutting back on other essential expenses like food or healthcare to keep their cars running. According to a survey by the Pew Research Center, 45% of low and moderate-income households reported having to make sacrifices in order to pay for gas. The ripple effects of high gas prices also have broader economic implications. As consumers reduce spending on fuel-intensive activities, businesses that rely on transportation, such as logistics companies or airlines, see their revenue decline. This can lead to layoffs, reduced investment, and a slowing economy. The International Monetary Fund has warned that the global oil price shock could reduce global GDP by up to 0.5% in 2023. The relationship between oil prices and economic growth is complex, but one thing is clear: when gas prices skyrocket, it's not just the immediate impact that matters, it's also the long-term consequences for jobs, investment, and overall prosperity. The sudden and drastic increase in oil prices has a ripple effect on the economy, impacting individuals and businesses alike. For many Americans, the price hike means a significant dent in their monthly budget. A study by the U.S. Energy Information Administration found that every 10% increase in gasoline prices leads to a 0.5% decrease in consumer spending. This phenomenon is particularly concerning for households living paycheck to paycheck, who may struggle to absorb such a substantial shock. According to data from the Federal Reserve, 40% of American families would not be able to cover an unexpected expense of $1,000 or more without going into debt. With oil prices soaring, these families face an even greater challenge. Businesses too are feeling the pinch. The increased cost of transporting goods and services translates to higher production costs, which may lead to price hikes down the supply chain. A study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that a 10% increase in transportation costs can reduce a company's profit margins by up to 5%. The oil price shock also has far-reaching implications for global trade and economic growth. The International Monetary Fund estimates that a $1 increase in oil prices can reduce global GDP by as much as 0.2%. In the United States, this translates to tens of billions of dollars lost per year. As policymakers grapple with the fallout from the price hike, it's essential to understand the underlying causes and potential solutions. One possible approach is to invest in renewable energy sources, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and mitigating the impact of price volatility. However, such a transition would require significant investment and infrastructure development. As the price of gasoline soared to an all-time high on May 4, 2022, millions of Americans were faced with a harsh reality. The average cost per gallon had increased by over 50% in just a matter of months, making it increasingly difficult for individuals and families to make ends meet. For those who rely heavily on their vehicles for daily transportation, the financial strain was particularly pronounced. Consider Rachel, a single mother living in suburban Los Angeles. With 2 young children to support and a husband working long hours to provide for the family, her monthly expenses were already stretched thin. But with gas prices continuing to rise, she found herself spending over 20% of her take-home pay on fuel alone, money that could have been allocated towards rent, groceries, or even saving for her kids' education. As oil prices continued to fluctuate wildly, the ripple effects began to spread throughout the economy. Small business owners, like independent truckers and delivery services, saw their profit margins shrink significantly as costs skyrocketed. Meanwhile, major corporations with extensive logistics networks struggled to absorb the increased expenses, passing on higher costs to consumers in the form of inflated prices for goods and services. Experts warn that such oil price shocks can have far-reaching consequences for individuals and families already living paycheck to paycheck. A study by the University of California estimates that households earning below $50,000 per year will experience an average loss of over 2% of their annual income due to rising gas prices, a staggering sum considering